Good evening, and thank you for joining us for our Breaking the Silence, Following Up When You Don't Hear Back webinar. My name is Jody Hammer, and I'm the Career Services Specialist here at NPCA's Global Reentry Program. And I'm happy to be here with you tonight to talk about this topic. And this topic is one that is very common. I know when I'm working with RPCV clients and the evacuees, one of the hardest things, I mean, they're frustrated by not hearing back, right? So they often ask, well, I don't know if I should move on. I don't know what to do because I really want this job. And so they kind of are still vested in it and hoping it comes through and yet, thinking, well, I kind of need to move ahead if not. And so we're going to talk about that concept and how to best handle the reality of that because you will experience it at some point or another. So, what's the hardest part of the application process for you? And I'd like you just to dump into the chat box. You can certainly write something there. And when you think of the application process, what's the hardest part for you? Just put that in, and we'll go from there. Thanks. I'll give you a few seconds to write that. And while we're waiting for that, I would like to say, so many parts are hard, right? I mean, the application process is pretty overwhelming in and of itself. So whether it's thinking about putting together an application, putting together your resume, writing that, elusive cover letter that, you want it to be just right, preparing for the interview, all of those can be really hard parts of the application process. So I'm one to say I understand it's hard and it's stressful, the entire process. But I definitely find from people that one of the hardest parts of the process for them is that just that radio silence, like just no, not hearing back at all, right? From the job, application, or maybe from the interview, if you were lucky enough to get an interview and then you just don't hear anything and you thought it went really well. So that can be really tough because kind of what I was saying just earlier, it's hard for you to fully move on when you're still waiting to hear on one job, right? But no news is good news is the traditional saying, but in this sense, it really is more, when no news is not good news, right? You want to know whether or not you got the position or whether or not you're going to get an interview. You just want to know, right? So I totally, get that. It also, there's a lack of closure when you don't know for sure, right? So it's kind of that whole unfinished business type of thing, right? And it is hard to fully move on before while you have, especially if this is a job that you applied for that was like a dream job for you. And so you really were putting all your eggs in that basket, like hoping beyond hope that this one is the one you would be called for an interview. And or maybe you were interviewed and then you just have this like silence. And so of course it's stressful, right? It's, you really want that position. So you prefer to just wait, but that's hard to do too, right? Really hard on your psyche, and also not probably the smartest thing to do in terms of waiting for one job for so long without, making efforts. And we'll talk all about those different kinds of things that you can do as well. But the radio silence also, it feels like rejection. You just like they didn't even take the time to let me know I wasn't going to be considered more, or they didn't, they didn't, I thought it went really well in the interview and we really connected, and then boom, I'm not hearing anything. So that's really tough. And let's see, Sharon is writing here. Yeah, focusing on federal jobs, so USA jobs is not like dealing with a person. You've got that right. I'm not sure if you were able to tune into our podcast recording, but of course it'll be finished once it's all finished. I think it's actually being submitted, being uploaded to Buzzsprout right now, so it'll be on Spotify. But we just did one with with an RPCV who happens to be in our a human resources expert, right, in the federal government. And that has some really good information in it. So I would urge you to go to Spotify and just search for jobs with Jody, and you can search for federal employment. And Angela On is the woman who I interviewed during that one. And so you might get some good tips from there, as well as going to our playlist of all the webinars where you can actually we've done some on the federal job search process, because it is really frustrating. I understand. I mean, the whole, and like you said, waiting for your application status to hopefully change to the next status step, and that can be grueling, right? Because it's laid out where it seems so logical, like what would happen, the next step is this, like it shouldn't take so long, right, is what I oftentimes hear from clients. Are like, why does it take so long? And I it's just it's a very bureaucratic process, right? But you're also looking at a lot of applications are going in there, right? So they're kind of first doing that initial I'm not sure actually, Sharon, where, for example, have you gotten the message that says, you've been found to meet the minimum qualifications and you've been forwarded on to the next, like to the hiring manager? If you've gotten that, it means that you have met, you've met the qualifications, and you've actually been found to be among the best of the best. I should have said that as well, so that then you're qualified on. That's typically, I think, the top maybe 20% or 10%. From that, the hiring manager is going to have generally a panel of resume reviewers where they'll each interview them individually, and they'll turn them in to the hiring manager. And then the hiring manager basically ranks who are the ones that came out on top. Those are the top ones we're going to interview. So then if you got that, you would be contacted for an interview. And then from there, it can be like forever, right? And one of the things to note with the federal hiring process that Angela really clarified, sometimes they will generally or oftentimes not give you that like rejection until that position is completely filled and or they're onboarded. And you know how long that can take with federal. That could definitely be a couple months. So that can be the real frustration. But just knowing that that part is really long, I think can be helpful, and just to expect that, right? So great. Gratefully, you're getting the referred status. Good. Oh, that's excellent, Sharon, because that means that you are doing the right thing in your, in your application materials. You're including those keywords that they're referencing in the, federal job description. And so you're doing a good job of that. So congratulations. So you've gotten part way. And then yeah, and then radio silence. Yeah. So when you get the referred to the hiring manager, then you just don't hear for a long time. I mean, it could be that you're still being considered, because I have some reasons why you'll get that maybe silence for a while, and we'll go over that momentarily. But what I would say is the if it's been like like you don't hear for the longest time, that might mean that they've chosen other applicants that were the best, like from the best of the best. So like kudos to you for making it to the best, but they may have chosen to interview, 3 to 5, whatever, different people that don't include you. And they're going to go through that process and see if any of those pan out. If they're not satisfied with any of those, or nobody, like it doesn't come through that, a candidate, that they would be interested in would be interested or able to take it, or something changes, whatever, then they can go out to that same roster, if you will, right? And they can contact you. So if they instead send you the rejection letter right then, saying, thanks so much, you haven't made the, whatever, da, 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 da. We're in the process of, whatever. If they send that out that we're going with some other people, we're testing that out, then it's a lot harder for them to come back and go, hey, do you still want to work with us? Right? So instead they put you through this limbo, like where you just don't hear until they either have really, they're really confident that the person's going to take it, or they want to interview you. Sometimes there might be some delay. I will tell you, with COVID and things like that, there are many positions that ended up getting put on hold. So maybe you were caught up, you might have been caught up in that, where you were, putting your stuff in, and then they were like, oh, we can't fill this after all for now. We have to just freeze it, for the time being. And I don't think they're always necessarily good at sending that out. So it could mean that as well. Okay. So I hope that answers, thank you. I hope that answers some of your questions. Let's go on then and talk about the radio silence, of in the job search process and how you can deal with it. So silence obviously is frustrating, right? In many ways, right? It really makes the job search seem so futile and frustrating, right? When you're not hearing back, it's like you're doing all this work, you're doing what you're supposed to do. So why can't they just have somebody tell you when you don't get the job or when you're not going to be considered? Like it seems so easy, right? Like it seems like it's not a hard thing for them to let people know, right? And yes, so I totally get that. It causes anxiety on, whether it leaves you in this limbo land, right? It's this anxiety of, did you make it to the next stage? Are they just slowed down, or are they, moving ahead with a different candidate? All of that. That's frustrating. And the no closure. You just want to be able to move forward either way. It's much easier to move forward when you have a yay or nay, right? Totally, especially when it's that job that's like you're so vested in, right? And silence makes us feel invisible is the last point that I really wanted to stress. You kind of feel like this number, like why, they don't even care enough about me to send, and people tend to personalize it. And I would definitely say try to step back from that and not personalize it. This is nothing that they're doing intentionally to cause you, grief. It's much more generally a factor of, some deficiency on their end, not enough staff, not enough resources, whatever the case is. Now COVID, people being out. I mean, there's just, with all of the outbreak, all of that, it's just a very complex um, hiring system in many ways. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about why the reasons you might not hear back from your application, right? So, it could be that the employer is just overwhelmed with the number of applicants that they're getting, right? Stats show, and I've seen a couple different stats, but around 118 applicants, excuse me, for each job. That's a pretty large number, right? So trying to go through that and process through and figure out it, and it depends on the kind of company you're talking about as well, right? Some will use the applicant tracking systems, or some ATS or some kind of a where they're scanning for keywords to simplify the process, or at least make it a little less overwhelming for them. So that's why I always recommend to folks, make sure that you go through that job description, and yeah, like I'm old school. I like to do it with the highlighter, whatever. But you can also do. Also, I like to, in addition, do a word cloud. You can do a free word cloud. Use one of the free word cloud generators, like Wordle is one. There's just put in a Google free word cloud generator, and you just literally dump the job description in there, or the link to it even, and it will create one of the cool graphics that you see with the different items. The words are smaller and bigger. The bigger the word, the more it's emphasized, the more times it shows up in that job description, right? The only caution I have for you, if you are focused on federal, don't put the whole job description in, because federal is very unique. There's all this just junk stuff. There's so much extra stuff, right? You would want to put, like, copy and paste in the requirements, the desired, required, whatever types of the requirements they're looking for, um and the job, the job description itself, not the, like, about our agency and all of that. Okay. So I think both doing one of those and identifying what are those keywords, and then making sure that on your application you are stressing those words. You want to make sure that you're, using those words and incorporating those, so that if they are using any kind of a scanner for keywords, they will get, you will, make it to that next level. Okay, great. Let's see. Sometimes, as I say, the employer's, too understaffed to personally reply to each applicant. It might be a nonprofit, and they're maybe struggling, and they have like very few staff to begin with. So they just don't feel they can even do that, even though, it's not hard. We get that. It doesn't take a lot of time, but sometimes they just feel too overwhelmed by it or whatever. And so sometimes you'll see, even in a job, have you ever seen in a job description, where it'll say, don't call us, we'll call you, or, qualified applicants will be contacted. Please, no phone calls. They'll try to say it, nicely, but basically telling you, don't call us. And it's interesting. I'm going to stop there for a moment, because I remember, on the one hand, I mean, I believe you want to follow instructions, right? Generally. And so if an employer asks you to do something like provide a cover letter or whatever, you're going to do it, right? So you would think, asking them to not call us, like we'll call you, don't call us, right? Or however it's worded. You would probably want to listen to that as well. But I've heard different thoughts on that from a couple different professionals in the past, and some like temporary employment, like recruiters and such, where they talk about, well, sometimes, I mean, they'll say that, and the person who does reach out very professionally, extremely professionally, not high pressure, why haven't you called us, whatever, very, professionally, to just say, I just wanted to, reach out and check the status of the XYZ position. I remain extremely interested in this opportunity and am confident my XYZ skills would be well utilized, something like that. And maybe if they said, don't call us, maybe, you email instead, right? Something like that. So that can actually bring you to the top. Yeah. So just keep that in mind, right? And then you're not hearing from them. It could be that your social media presence might turn them off, and about approximately 70%, at least 70% of employers are now looking at, it says here, screening, right, their applicants social media before hiring them, right? Now when they do that depends, right? So some could do it right up front where they're deciding who they're going to bring in for an interview, but many others will check that after they've seen the ones that they want, and they've seen them in person, maybe in the interview or in preparation for the interview, to kind of get a little more information on who they're going to be talking to. So it could be at different times, right? But your social media presence is really important. And if you are, on the fence about, or thinking, maybe you don't have a LinkedIn account, LinkedIn is really the best social networking platform that's out there, right? You can get so much from it, from the free feature. I truly do not believe you need to pay for the premium feature. You could certainly take advantage of it for the one free month that they'll give you as a test, but you do not need to pay for it to be able to do an effective job search, right? But that, just having your presence there, right? A good professionally written, you do a good job on writing it, and it's kind of, you get to tailor it. We have lots of, webinars on, writing creating your LinkedIn profile. There's some really good sources as well online. I love the Muse. It's one of my favorites. They have some really good workshops on that, and, free ones. And then also, I like Balance Career has some really good stuff as well. There's lots of resources out there, right, for you. So think about that if you need help in that area. Okay, so great. And then it could be that the employer is pursuing other candidates, right? One or more other candidates, but they're holding off on notifying the pool just in case they have a fall through, or they decide, they don't like any of the ones that are, that they interview, right? So then they could reach out easier to the next pool. Certainly, right? Yeah, so definitely that's what might be happening behind the scenes, right? To reasons why you might not hear back from them. Okay. So there are some ways that you can actually reduce the uncertainty, post interview. You can actually reduce that in a lot of ways. At the end of the interview, I'm talking about while you're in the interview. Okay. So you can prevent some of that unknown and that feeling of, when are they going to get back to me? What's the status? All of that, by incorporating into your final questions. You know how in the end of almost every interview, at the end, the last question will be, so what questions do you have for us, or something like that, some variation, right? If you take advantage of and ask one of the questions, a question such as, what are the next steps in the hiring process, and when do you anticipate making your final decision? Right? So if you ask that two-part question, you might find out valuable information like, well, this is the first interview process. The set will invite select candidates to a second interview and or a whatever test of sorts. Maybe they develop and implement a presentation if they're a trainer, has been the situation for me in the past, whatever. They can share that with you, so it gives you more insight, right, as to what to prepare for as well. but then also the when they plan to make their hiring decision, right? So that's crucial because if this is a position that they have to fill before the end of the year, you know that it's going to work, move a lot. It's probably going to move a lot faster, right? Than, maybe there, because sometimes funds are tied to fiscal year. Like they had a grant that allowed them to hire this position in fiscal year 2020. If they didn't hire it in that, they might have to start all over with the grant. So there's a lot of incentive for them to obviously hire then, right? So you can get some good information regarding that. It helps you set the expectations for what might come next and what the next steps are and what the projected time frame is. But I do always say to people, the information they provide is obviously an estimate. It's probably the best estimate they have, about that. But inevitably, I would say more often than not, the estimated time frame to fill a position is oftentimes like it's under estimated, right? So they estimate less than it takes longer than what they think it will, almost always, to fill positions. So I always say to clients, when they give you that estimate, unless it's like next year and they're so far off, whatever. But if it's like, oh, we're hoping to finish our first round of interviews and then do the second ones, and we're hoping to make our decisions by next month, or whatever, like, or whatever, in the next 4 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, don't stress when it gets to be a day over that and you haven't heard anything, because honestly, I usually say double whatever time period they put out before you're totally, like, concerned, right? Now, it doesn't mean that you can't reach out to them before it's doubled, right? That doubled time of the estimated time frame, right? You certainly could reach out to them, and we are going to spend a little bit of time here tonight talking about how might you reach out and craft that kind of, email or, phone call or, whatever, um, to check on status. Okay. And when is it okay and appropriate to do that, right? Okay. So I do want to talk now about, so after you finished the interview, right? And you've been waiting, that silence can just be brutal, right? Because you can start to think, your mind it can play really, really terrible tricks on you too, right? A lot of times people regret, oh, I should have said this, I could have brought up that, I shouldn't have done that, and they end up shooting on themselves, right? Talking about what they should have done, shouldn't have done. And just to try to remind yourself that you did your best in the moment. You may have learned from that interview, and you might have a much better response for a future one, but you did the best with what you had at the time, right? So try not to ruminate on it. um, Keep looking, and this is one of the hardest ones, right? Keep looking at other jobs. Don't stop your job search for any job until it's official, right? In fact, I would say until you're really completely cleared and you have a start date, and you're like onboarded, right? Because it's, just in case something falls through, right? You don't want to be in a situation of completely halting for whatever one job, and then you don't get it for whatever reason, and then here you are. Oh my gosh, you know how long it takes, right, to get the word out, put the, respond to the job vacancies, do your resumes, your cover letters, get those out. Like there's a whole, system, and you don't want all that blank space, time. Okay. I also recommend, and it's recommended. I'm going to send you a good article on this as well, where they talk more about these. But keeping busy, keeping productive, right? So trying to distract yourself in different ways, right? Not only by continuing the job search, because let's face it, that can be tough and hard and depressing and all of that, right? But also find some kind of way to maybe, maybe something new to you. Maybe, you join a new group, on LinkedIn, and you start getting involved with posting things there and listening and seeing, whatever. Maybe you decide, okay, this is some time to really get my, LinkedIn profile up to speed, or my resume, let's do some, whatever. But you can also, even, maybe it's even like volunteering, doing something that feeds your soul, right? Because that can be very good during the time of, the whole job search, right? Where you get, it's very easy to get down, to get frustrated, to get, just it's not a fun process. Most people don't like going through the job search process, right? So um, so yeah, so it's like that's something that you can do. And when I was talking about updating the LinkedIn profile, yes, Sharon, you said you thought about the LinkedIn recently after taking, the workshop, and you had an outdated profile, no activity, and you thought your account was deleted, but it sounds like maybe it was there, but you just have to kind of reactivate it maybe. So hopefully you can do that, or start anew if it has been, deleted and whatnot. But when you have, if after an interview, if there hasn't been any response in 2 weeks, right? After 2 weeks, 10 to 14 days, generally, they say, you can follow up with a short, very professional note, inquiring about the status of the application and just reconfirming your interest in that opportunity. That can actually make you stand out, right? Because, oh, wow, they are so interested that they're following up with us. So that can be really
Mhm.
good. You wouldn't want to do that if they said no follow up, or they gave you instructions not to do that, or maybe they said, the next stage will be, whatever, and they kind of gave you that it was going to be longer, like we're not going to be able to move to stage 2 until next month, so we'll let you know next month whether you get. Don't contact them after 2 weeks if they said it was 1 month, right? So you want to really follow their guidance in that regard, right, in terms of time frames and such. But when you do reach out, if you write an email, again, it would be similar to what I was saying earlier, something just to say, I just wanted to, follow up and, on the status of the whatever position. And thank you once again for interviewing me. I really enjoyed the opportunity to share my skills as related to this position, and I'm confident, whatever, just pretty short, and be confident in it, right? Not arrogant, but confident. I'm confident my XYZ skills would be well utilized, and I would welcome the chance to join your team in this capacity or something. You know what I mean? Like, just letting them know. And your subject line, I would put follow up. Like, I mean, you could put follow up colon and whatever your name, right? Or follow up, follow up, RE, whatever the job title, and then your name, or however you want to do that. But something where you have it so they can see what is this when they glance at it. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions about what we've talked about so far, we're getting close to the end, and then I'll take whatever questions you have. But please put them in the chat box if you do have any questions at this point, and I will be sure to answer those. Okay. So lastly here, and breathe, right? And I think that's very appropriate and very necessary, right? To whatever the stress you're feeling, about your job search, like the uncertainty of where you're going to be living, working, all of that. And it can be also stress coupled with, COVID stress, which is very common, right? And distress, and other things that are just making our society so bleak in many ways, right? And just difficult. Just, remember, breathe, and ground yourself, right, in the fact that you are doing everything you can, and things, can take time, and just really, try to do whatever. If you do breathing exercises at all, just the simplest of, breathing the, like, 3 to 5 seconds in through your nose, and then out, exhale through your mouth, and then again, breathe in through your nose, a nice deep breath, and then slowly breathe out, exhale through your mouth. That can really help just calm your body, and bring you some peace, even in the midst of, such chaos as can be the job search process. So those are the big points that I wanted to make tonight. And I wanted to leave, room, if there time for questions, if there are any questions. Um, let's see, let me check here. And so, okay, so you've confirmed a lot of what I've been suspecting about the silence. Yep. great. So I know you probably, guessed that it might be this and, certain aspects of it at least. And, it truly is, not, not a simple thing. It's quite complex, right? There's a lot of factors that can weigh into not hearing back. And, I've heard stories too, where, somebody has been waiting to hear and they just didn't hear. And it's been like 2 months and they're just like, what, they've pretty much given up, but they just send a final, hey, hi, I just wanted to, check on the status of da 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 da, da," and they reached out finally, right? And the employer comes back and says, I'm so glad you contacted us. We apologize for the incredible delay. There's been some unforeseen circumstances that have put a temporary halt to the process. But I'm glad to inform you that as of next week, we are restarting and we will be contacting you about an interview, whatever. And they ended up like it worked out, even when it was, a late, like a really lengthy delay. Okay. It won't always, but sometimes it does, right? Other questions. Okay, this one looks like merging old contacts into a new profile. Oh, that's fun. So you've found the way. Yeah, that's not a fun one. Been working LinkedIn. Yep, endorsements, recommendations, the posting. Yep, when you post to your groups that you belong in, that can really raise your profile to a degree where you become, you don't want to do it all the time because then it's more annoying. But when it's a limited number of appropriate, like posts and sharing things, people begin to see you as a thought leader in one way or another. And that can be really good because when you do reach out eventually to a contact on maybe one of your groups, which remember, when you're in a group, you have access to the instant message to people in that group, other people that you may not be connected with individually other than from that group. So it's really it's a real benefit to join some of the groups that you're most interested in that have to do with your sector of interest or sectors of interest if you have more than one. So definitely join those. And there are so many people in the world. It's not just here in the States, it's around the world that are really in LinkedIn. So if you're also looking for international at some point, that can also be helpful. So great. And commenting, you are doing all the right things, Sharon. Absolutely. And I have every reason to believe you will be successful. The question is when, right? It's you will get a job. It's a matter of when that will come through. And lastly, I do say to people as well, remember when you're applying for your dream jobs, right, where wow, this would be the dream job, I really want this job, and you're obviously very vested in it, if and when you do get a rejection for that, it can really go to your soul because it's just something that you're so interested in, right? But what you want to do is really learn from that position, right? From your rejection there. Follow up, as I've said in some other webinars, follow up with a thank you for the rejection letter, note, to show them how professional you are, even in the face of rejection. And that can look as simple as, dear, whatever the hiring official's name is, thank you for letting me know regarding your selection decision for the program manager position, da da da. While disappointed to have not been chosen, I wish you the very best with your selected candidate. Should you have future opportunities, please let me know as I remain deeply vested or committed, whatever, to blah, 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 the, mission, and am confident my XYZ skills would be well utilized. The reason you do that is twofold. One, you let them know that you are thankful and you appreciate being that they let you know. But it maybe that position doesn't, the person that was cleared, that was going to start, falls through for some reason. Maybe the background check doesn't come through, or they change their mind, or they have to relocate to a different part of the country for family reasons. Who knows, right? Who do you think is most present in their mind right when they are when they suddenly have that job open again? Yep, that person who did the incredibly professional thank you for the rejection letter, that you don't call that, of course, but that can set you up for success, right? What you can do also in that is you can even say, I would welcome any feedback based on my performance and application to, assist me with future, opportunities as I'm very interested in, da, 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 this company, this organization and whatever. They might, now they oftentimes won't, but sometimes they will, right? Sometimes they won't and sometimes they will, where they'll maybe come back and say, hey, you were a really great candidate. The reason we went with the other person was she had 2 more years of, specialized experience in XYZ. Well, okay, you can't blame them. You know that's great. You know why, what it was. But they might come back with, we weren't as sure of your blah 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 based on, what you shared in the interview. Who knows? I mean, they can come back with some helpful information, right? And that can just help you to best prepare for the next one. Okay? So I hope that helps. Let me see if there are any other questions here. Yes, again, bureaucracy or waiting for the hiring manager. Yes, it's not a fun process, and I know it's hard not to get stressed and a little nervous about it. But I truly think if you do, continue on as if you don't have this position, right? So that you're open to considering other ones and put them in. Sometimes it's like, boy, luck strikes in threes, maybe, where you had nothing for the longest time and suddenly you're contacted about three different jobs, and then you have more irons in the fire, right? Which can be great. So great. So I hope that helped tonight. What I'd like to do is I'm going to stop the recording now, and then if you do have additional questions, I can certainly stay on the line for a few minutes. But that way we'll just respect the time. If you do need to get going, I totally understand as well. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, and happy holidays.